received a text on if I was going to be talking about the alien sightings at Jacksonville Beach. I'm not going to do that, okay? So I want to let my brother know that I'm not doing that at all. Only reason he can. So what I want to talk about is really what we've been doing at the University of North Florida relating to Native Americans. This is Florida Archaeology Month. Every year, the state of Florida has designated March Florida Archaeology Month to show kind of appreciation for Florida's past. My really big research interest is Native Americans here, kind of in northeastern Florida. And I think Jacksonville has this incredibly rich Native American history. But unfortunately, I think it's a history that's kind of under-publicized and maybe also kind of underappreciated. I think most people, their image of Native Americans in northeastern Florida is basically just this small 5 to 10 year window in the 1560s that's provided by Europeans. And I think when we look at that, that is just a passing glimpse that's really filtered through European eyes. Really, it's a history that I think misses or ignores 8,000 years of previous history and another 140 years after Europeans arrived. So what I want to do today is just kind of cherry pick a few time periods and some of the stuff that we've learned, about the Native Americans, because really this is a history that's not in the textbooks right now. It's something we're trying to put out there, but it's a history that's literally kind of beneath your feet. So let's go ahead and see what we can do here. I think the first thing I wanted to do, I get this thing figured out. There we go. Is to kind of contextualize Native Americans in this area. I think one of the really major questions, constant question I get is when were they first here? When did Native Americans first arrive? Right now, based on all of our current information, the earliest date that we have for the pioneering, the initial wave of people into Florida is going to be about 14.5 thousand years ago. Okay? What we need to think about, this is the tail end of the Pleistocene. This is the tail end of the waning years of the Ice Age. Okay, so it's going to be cooler, not really, really cold, but cooler, windier, and drier. Okay, a lot of the surface water that we have is going to be really sparse. What it is a lot of the ocean waters is trapped in glaciers, so it's kind of drawing water in, which means that the Florida Peninsula is probably 2.5 times the width it is right now. So if we kind of look at this image right here, this is probably Paleoindian times, and it's going to get narrower and narrower as glaciers start to melt, the sea level rises. When the sea level rises, also the interior water table is going to rise. So when the natives first arrived into this area 10,000, 12,000, 14,000 years ago, the Everglades don't exist. The St. Johns River is not flowing. It's probably intermittent. In some areas it's completely dry. But as the glaciers begin to melt, water levels rise, and we start to see the formation of rivers and creeks and lakes and wetlands and all of that. So that doesn't really start happening really strongly until about 6,000 to 8,000 years ago. There we go. If we start looking at where are Native Americans at this early time, what you can see from this map is kind of looking at the broader distribution of where these early sites are, and where they are is really in the eastern panhandle down towards Tampa Bay area. They're really just hugging that Gulf Coast area. Also, you got to remember that the shoreline is way out here. Today, right now, if we walked out to the beach right here and we project ourselves back 14,000 years ago, it would be another 90 miles back then to the actual shoreline. So you can see how much wider the state would have been at the time. At this time, we tracked the movement on the basis of these really diagnostic kind of projectile points. They're called Clovis, and we have our version called Swanee points. So archaeologists kind of look at the distributions of them. Also going on at this time is the Ice Age fauna are still here. We have direct evidence of humans in association with mastodons and mammoth in Florida, with Bison antiquus, which is the Ice Age version of the bison. So we really have good evidence for that. Unfortunately, there's not hardly anything here in northeastern Florida. We're considered to be an outlying area. We lack the availability of water, and we lack the availability of stone at the ground surface. Okay? These areas where you see all these sites, that's because there is it's called karst topography. That means limestone and chert, and the stone sources are at the surface. Our stone sources here in northeast Florida are hundreds and hundreds of feet below all the sand that's here, so there's no access to them. So what we'll see here, compared to other areas of the state, we really do lack stone sources. We don't have a lot of projectile points later on in history. We get them early on. So what we're going to start to see here in our area, about 8,000 BC to 6,000 BC, we start to see for the first time actual occupation by Native Americans in the Jacksonville area. And at this point in time, what we're starting to see are occasional stone points and maybe what we call debitage, or the flake from them making or maintaining, reworking the points that they have. So these early occupations that we see here during this time, they're really short term. Okay? They're brief, they're transient, they're staying here, they're camping here, they're probably hunting, but they're part of these really large territorial circuits that they're making throughout the state, where they're going through areas like Gainesville, they're going through areas of the Swanee River where they can get that stone, and then they're moving towards this area, probably hunting and doing other types of activities, and leaving small amounts of material behind. So we start to see Native Americans in the archaeological record of Duval County, Nassau County, really about 8,000 to 6,000 years ago. During that earlier time period, Paleolithic, I think we have one projectile point. It was found off Ponte Vedra Beach. So it's probably something that washed in from farther out when the sea itself, the coastline was much farther out. What we start to see is the stabilization of sea levels, probably about 3,000 BC. So at that point in time, what we start to see is that they're going to start taking advantage of aquatic resources, marsh resources. So we're going to start to see the formation of what we call shell middens, which means that oyster populations are here, they're stable, they're viable, and they're eating lots of oyster, they're also fishing. What's interesting, the earliest shell midden that's dated along the Atlantic coast is right here in Jacksonville Beach. It's called the Spencer midden. It's dated to about 37.5 BC. It's small, it's thin, but it's got a lot of shell in there, it's got animal bone, and other types of artifacts in there. By about 3,000 BC, they're probably living here in the Jacksonville area along the Atlantic coast on the barrier islands full time. So that's really when we start to see really sustained occupation, thicker deposits beginning about 3,000 BC. One of the big finds that we start to see are they're called shell rings. And this is a manifestation that begins about 28.5 BC. And it's along
Sorry, you keep cutting out. We can't hear you. Yeah, that mic is not.
You may have to hold your mic. Keep cutting out.
Cutting out. Hello? Okay. So what we have is
Further down.
further down. You think that'll work? Let's try that. Hello? Hello?
Yeah.
Okay. Just holler out if you can't hear me. I'll try to talk louder again. So what we see about 3,000, just inside of 3,000 BC, we start to see things that are called shell rings. And we start to see these along the Atlantic coast from southeast Florida, all the way up into the northern part of South Carolina. And they're called shell rings. Okay, this is the name that we've kind of, archaeology has posed on it. And ring is kind of a misnomer. Ring implies that it's a perfect circle. What these typically are is some sort of arc-shaped ridge of shell. So this is a high ridge of piled shell that at least has an arc form to it. As you can see, these are kind of silhouettes. They can be kind of horseshoe-shaped. They can be kind of C-shaped. Some of them are kind of perfect enclosed circles, and we call these rings. And what's interesting about them, they have these areas which have these pronounced, these are high. Some of these areas can be 3 to 6 feet high of piled shell. They can be 10 to 15 yards wide. So they're really distinct, and they have this curved element to it. And inside the curved element is typically a cleared out plaza area. Okay? So we see these going along the Atlantic coast, and they're really short-lived. They began about 2850 BC. By about 1650, 1500 BC, they're gone. They're not making them anywhere. And these are pieces of architecture. These are intentional constructs. This is just not random haphazard piling up the shell. They're intentionally doing this. So, two of them that are here in Jacksonville are really important. What we have in Jacksonville is Oxide Island, which is just off the coast of Black Hammock Island, is the oldest shell ring on the Atlantic coast. And Rollins shell ring, which is on Fort George Island, is the largest along the Atlantic coast. So here in Jacksonville, we have the earliest shell ring and the largest shell ring along the entire Atlantic coast. This is the south end of Black Hammock Island, if you're familiar with it. The mouth of the St. Johns River would be right over here. Mayport down in that area. This is National Park Service property. But actually what we're interested in is this little island right here that's off of Black Hammock Island. And you can see this kind of, I don't know if it shows up that well, but can you see this kind of like little kind of sea right here, comma of trees that are there? That's a little oxide island. It's called oxide. It's just covered with oxide vegetation. So it represents this area right here. That part of the shell ring is actually sticking above ground. Okay? And we actually went out in the marsh here and probed and found that the rest of the ring is actually buried into the marsh. So back 2,850 years ago, this was all on dry land. So this has basically been covered by rising sea levels. But we got this little crescent area that's here. Okay? It is a completely enclosed ring. What we're getting is, this is pre-pottery. They're not making pottery yet. What gets really interesting, the precursor to pottery is they're taking round balls of clay and they're heating the round balls of clay, and then they're taking those heated ones and they're adding them probably to either wooden bowls or maybe skin bags, and they're indirect boiling. So they're taking them, they're heating them in fires, they're basically putting them into these bags and warming whatever it is that they're eating. And it's from there they're going to get the idea of making pottery. So we actually had sampled this area really with the National Park Service, and we found lots of animal bone from what they're eating. We're finding pieces of work alligator tooth. There are several pieces of work deer bone. We're getting pieces of flakes from stone tool making. So it really is an active community that was there. Okay. We also then have. We also have the biggest one. This one's on Fort George Island, and it's in the Rollins Bird Sanctuary. It's called the Rollins Shell Ring. And this one is massive. You can see it's kind of this horseshoe shape here. In the highest areas, it's really topographically complex. The highest areas, it's about 9 to 10 feet high, a piled shell. So it can vary from 10 feet high to maybe 2 feet high. And it's got these almost little ringlets here as well. From here to here is almost 300 meters. It's almost 3 football fields. This interior cleaned out plaza area is about 170 meters. So you can see how solid this shell is. So that's basically probably about 3.5, 4 feet of solid shell, and then below it. So it basically has this higher in the middle, and then it thins out on the edges, and it's massive here. Lots, probably close to 10,000 pieces of pottery recovered from the excavations that were done here. Lots and lots of animal bone from what they're eating, but not much else in terms of artifact diversity. There's some bone artifacts that are in-sized pins and a few other pieces of lithics, but large amounts of pottery. And what archaeologists are really kind of debating right now is what's going on here. Are these full-time villages where they're living throughout the year, or are these places where they're coming together and feasting during certain times of the year? And that's what people start to think that what they are now is that these are locations that they're gathering places where they're having feasts and they're having other kinds of rituals and other kinds of ceremony, because the kind of pottery that we're finding here is going to be heavily incised. And in other areas where we find sites of the same time period, they're much smaller sites and the pottery tends to be plain. So there appears to be something different going on here. I'm not sure if this is going to show up. This is what's called LiDAR. This is the new big thing we use in archaeology. You guys may have seen it. They were talking about finding all the Maya sites within a heavily dense canopy forest. And basically, this is aerial. It's shooting down little laser pulses, and each pulse actually has a 3-dimensional location, which has elevation. So it creates these maps that are elevation maps, and it's represented by color. So where you see the red, that's high, but when it gets white, it's getting higher and higher. And if you've been on Fort George Island, there's Mount Cornelius up in the corner. You can see that really, this is an old beach dude, and it's massive right up in there. But what we're interested in, I don't know if it shows up for you guys, but there's this little arc right there that is the shell ring. So it shows up on this LiDAR. And we can blow it up a little bit. So you can see it, this is it right here. And you can see it right here. That's what I showed you. Here's like a topographic map of it. So this is a massive type of structure here. So they're actually probably having large feasts here. There's no burials or anything like that here. That's never been found. This area here is almost free. There's so much shell piled up here, and this area here is almost completely free of shell. Most of what shell that's in there is dating to a much more recent period in time, so it's unrelated to that kind of construction. The other thing that was going on here that people may not realize is that this is pottery. The oldest pottery in all of North America, this is all of North America, comes from two areas, the Savannah River and the St. Johns River. Right now, our dates are running, it probably can push this back to about 2705 BC. Along the Savannah River, they have dates of about 3000 BC, so they're just slightly earlier. But this is the earliest pottery in all of North America. And we call it orange pottery because of its coloring. It's fired in an oxidized environment, and the iron that's in the clay gets enhanced at those higher temperatures and the flow of oxygen, and it gives it this kind of orangish color. And if you look at it, if you ever feel it, there are all these little worm-like grooves that are in it, and that's because they're using, as a temper, they're using Spanish moss. So as they're working the clays, everyone thinks that they just go out there, find clay, and start working their pottery. That's not how it works. They go out there, they find the pottery, they find the clay, they bring it back, and what they probably do is they let it dry out. And then once it's dry out, they pound it down, and then they probably sieve it, they pull out things that they don't want, then they rehydrate it. And when they rehydrate it, they add a temper to it. And this is stuff, and a plastic, it kind of gives it a property that it doesn't actually have. And the earliest one that they use is Spanish moss. So they wedge that Spanish moss in it, they make their pots, and when they fire it, the Spanish moss burns out, so you see all these kind of grooves in it. We get it where it's incised, and that's a formal decoration there, or it can be plain. Most sites are plain, but when you get to those shell rings, there's a large percentage that is incised. So this takes a lot longer to make, because basically, with these incised decorations, they're going to have to, each individual pot, do those incisions in the damp clay, and sometimes they also punk tape, where they basically jab it, and it gives it these little designs in here. So this is orange pottery. It's here until about 1000 BC. Then they'll start adding other things, better things, sand and grit. We'll see they'll add sponge spicules to it as well, which are really better for long-term use of pottery. All right, so I just wanted to cover some early things that are going on. So just to recap here, we have early occupations along the coast where they're actually exploiting marine and estuary resources, beginning about 3000 BC. And at that point in time, fish becomes a dietary staple of life here. These become people of the marsh from that point until European contact. That is their primary mode of subsistence. We'll see they'll add a little bit of agriculture, but that's really, really late. We'll touch upon that. So I'm going to jump ahead now to about 1000 AD. Okay? Doesn't mean that there isn't great stuff going on in between those two periods. There is, but you guys don't want to be here for 5-10 hours, so we're going to jump ahead. So this is it. So if we look across the landscape right now, okay, 1000 AD. 1000 AD, we as archaeologists call this the Mississippian period. And this is the high water mark in terms of socio-political complexity among Native Americans. It runs from about 950, 1000 AD up until European contact. In the interior area, this is called the Mississippian world. So be inside this kind of yellow line, this is large-scale agriculture, corn, beans, and squash, chieftain-level socio-political organization where there are the haves and the have-nots. There is large mound building. They have big temple mounds, which priests and chiefs are living on these temple mounds, and they're elevated above everyone else. Then you have these areas that are considered to be kind of outside the Mississippian world. Okay? These are groups that are here that are not major maize farmers. They're hunters and gatherers. But what we're going to see here, while they're farming here, and while this one site here called Cahokia, Cahokia is the queen mother of all Native American sites in the eastern U.S. It is the biggest community of people in the continental U.S. until Philadelphia in the 1800s. This was massive, and it was short-lived. It straddled the Mississippi River, being on both the St. Louis, Missouri side and the East St. Louis, Illinois side. Okay? And it probably existed from about 1000 to about 1250, 1300. Then it kind of really downsizes and kind of disappears. But during that time, it's really major. And what we're going to see is we have groups here in Jacksonville who are in contact with them. Okay? So if we look across the landscape at 1000 AD, what's going on is that there is this movement of foreign exotic items all across the eastern U.S. So we start to see copper that's being mined as nuggets within the Appalachian Mountains and more so within the Great Lakes region. We see galena, which is a lead ore that's coming from the Ozarks of Missouri and Arkansas. We're going to start to see mica, which is like a mirror mineral, strong reflective quality, various types of igneous rocks, basalt, greenstone, which we're going to make these large celts, or people like to call tomahawks out of. And then we're going to see what's going to come out of Florida. What's going to be the big thing that landlocked people in Florida are going to want? That's exotic to them. Shell. What did you say? Sunshine? Sunshine? I'll take that. But I'm going to go with shell. Probably other things too. Probably any kind of coastal resources. Shark's teeth, Yopon holly, the black drake, which really is a coastal distribution. So these things are starting to circulate throughout the eastern U.S. in either raw form or in modified form. And what we're going to see here is that the Native Americans who are here are going to be major consumers of these exotic materials, even though they're not the farmers like the people in the interior are. So this leads me to, this is our main project that we're doing at UNF. We are concerned with the entire Native American history. We touch upon all different periods, but this is really what I'd say my real focus is. And it's looking at this period from 900 to 1250. I'm just going to say 1000 AD just to make it simpler. But we have about 17 sites in this area. We have close to 50 radiocarbon dates. We have a great handle on the time period here for it. They are fisher hunters and gatherers. There's no doubt about this. There's no agriculture going on. There's no corn farming. Nothing like that is going on. They're living off the boundary of this area. They are fisher folks first, shellfish collectors, and they're taking some animals, but they pale in comparison to the amount of fish and aquatic resources that they're really focusing on. You guys still hear me? The research is multi-scalar, and by that is we're trying to look at social relations, social interaction at the local level, at the site level. What's going on within that site or excavation, which would have been a Native American community? How is that Native American community articulating and communicating and interacting with other contemporaneous communities? And then how is that grouping of communities here in the Jacksonville area interacting with groups along the broader St. Johns River, regional, and within the broader world? Now, their world isn't a global world, but their world covers much of the eastern U.S. So we're really trying to tack back and forth, looking at these different geographical scales. Also, our scales are going to be multi-scale in terms of time. We want to look at the historical trajectories that led to this and where it goes after this. Because really, we can't understand a group of people in the past by just cutting them out and studying them real hard and kind of not considering the people around them or the historical trajectories that led to that point. So we're trying to look at all that to really understand what's going on here. Okay? Our focus is clearly on this one site called the Mill Cove Complex, but we don't want to be myopic. We're also looking at other village sites that date to this time period. So there are probably 12 of them that would have stretched roughly from just north of the JU campus around into the Mill Cove area, into the Mayport area, on most of all the barrier islands up to the north end, Old Town north end of Amelia Island. Each one of them probably would have been a village. They're probably living in true villages as we typically think of Native Americans. They have a burial mound where they're burying everyone. So this is really a sedentary kind of life going on at this point in time that we're really trying to focus on. And what you're going to see here is that these groups are kind of establishing contacts. They're forging alliances with neighbors and with distant communities. And this is going to be really important because they are not cut off or isolated from what's going on in the interior Southeast. Okay? And I think we have really strong evidence for this. I think sometimes people want to think that the natives here are just sitting by fishing and farming and just dealing with stuff at a local level. Sure, all their food is coming from the local level, but their politics and their other types of interactions are really spread out over incredibly large areas, especially during this 900 to 1250 time period. So this is our main area. This is Davis Point Bridge. This is Mill Cove. Mill Cove, I don't think people realize this, Mill Cove used to be a world-class fishery back in the early 1900s into the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. Ernest Hemingway, Ted Williams. I always say Ted Williams, my students like, well, who? Ted Williams. Ted Williams. There are all these great sportsmen who would come here and fish, tarpon and other things. It used to be like 15 to 20 feet deep. Now it's all silted in because they redesigned and dredged out the river. So the flow of the river used to come down like this, but now they've cut through that area and it's a completely different kind of flow, so it's caused it to silt in. But this would have been incredible. This is it. This is Publix. This is Winn-Dixie. This is where they're getting their resources, right out there, and it's incredibly productive. And the two sites that we're considering here, we call this the Mill Cove Complex, and it has these two massive burial mounds. They're gone. Well, one of them's gone now. The other one has a house on top of it. But these are major, okay? They're called Grant and Shields. And we have an individual here whose name is Clarence B. Moore. And Clarence B. Moore was a wealthy Philadelphia socialite who got bored with Philadelphia socialite. So he basically took this large inheritance that he had. He bought a steamboat. He outfitted it as a lab, and he decided to start on the St. Johns River, and he went up the river or south along the river, basically asking people, do you have a strange-looking hill or knoll on your property? If so, can I dig it? So basically, he's digging Indian mounds along the St. Johns River in the early 1890s. He then moves on and pretty much hits most of the navigable waterways in Florida, Georgia, Alabama, and South Carolina up until about 1920. So he does all this massive amount of excavating these sites. Archaeologists kind of love him and hate him today because he really didn't take the notes or the methods that we use today, but he published what he did. So at least we have information on what he did. And he hit both of these mounds, the Grant and the Shields mound, as well as probably another dozen here in the Jacksonville area that date to different time periods. This is another form of LiDAR. It's called LiDAR derived. This is just a contour map. Okay? So what you see here, this drawn here is the bluff line coming in right in here. It comes back out, comes back down, and rises back up here. So there are these two high points along the bluff. And what we're going to see is these two mounds are kind of grafted. They actually chose the highest points right here to put these burial mounds. And these are massive burial mounds. These are the two biggest mounds in northeast Florida. They're only 700 meters apart. One is called Grant. This is his depiction of it. This is Clarence B. Moore's drawing in 1895. I don't think it's to scale. I mean, I don't think he's like little hobbits or anything like that. But he's just trying to show how large it is. He talks about it being 25 feet high, and it's on a bluff that's 25 feet high. So it's probably 50 feet or more if you're in the river looking up to the top of the mountain. So it was huge. He also states in this time that it's already eroding into the river. This has been destroyed by residential development. The other one, it shows up. Can you see this kind of strange looking landform? I think this is part of a natural dune. What this is a relic dune field. If you've ever been out to this area of Fort Caroline, it's kind of undulating, which is not typical of our area, but it's an old Pleistocene dune field. And they're grafting onto these higher points to build a burial mound, and then their community is going to be in the area in between it. And so here's his drawing of the Shields mound. You can still see this today. This is this part here. Here's the little ramp part. Makes this little like fish hook element right here. It's got this huge ravine, which is right in there. And so it's still here today. Okay? He excavated these mounds. What he found here is incredible. Okay? That he found hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of burials. So these are community cemeteries, but he's also getting all this exotic material. So I want to show you some of the things that he found in 1895 and 96 in these mounds. Most of this stuff is curated at the American Museum, the National Museum of the American Indian, which is part of the Smithsonian. So I'm just going to go real quick with this, but these are wooden cones right here, and these are ear spools. Like kids today would call these gauges. These part here would go into the lobe. They're made out of wood and they're covered with copper. Okay, they've only been found in a few sites. Everyone thinks they're being produced at that Cahokia site in the Illinois, Missouri area. We're getting these great little pieces of copper. So what's going on at this time? They're taking nuggets of copper and they're cold hammering these things into flat little sheets. They may be doing a little heating, but no true metallurgy or any kind of smelting, nothing like that. But they're getting down into these really thin sheets, and they're using those either as foil to wrap around shell beads or wood beads or some sort of artifact like that, or they're making these little repose embossed designs on them, which are these like circles, these little beaded areas. Okay? The other thing we have here, this is to me the most iconic artifact from Jacksonville. This is called the long-nosed god mask. So it's got this kind of shield shape to it. They're about this big. Okay? It's got these large goggle eyes and it had this huge nose. Here are two of them from Cahokia, and this is what it looked like. This is the actual one that's still at the museum. This is a Stephen Moore's drawing of it. Only 7 pairs have been found in all of North America out of copper. Everyone believes that they're being produced at Cahokia. And we have here. So what are a bunch of fisher hunter-gatherers in Jacksonville, Florida doing with these really high-profile types of artifacts? We're getting mica, large amounts of mica he's finding. These are galena cubes. With the galena, a lot of times you see these divots in them. They're probably using their thumb. They're probably using this for a silver kind of, or metallic kind of a pigment. We're getting these elbow pipes here. These are made out of steatite. These are smoking pipes. Steatite, the closest source for that would be maybe steatite soapstone ridge in the Atlanta area. This is coming from the Ozarks. This is coming from the Appalachian Mountains. So these things are coming here into Jacksonville from a great distance away. We're getting lots. Grand Mountain produced, I think, 175 of these celts. So these celts are basically, usually they're made to fell trees and to do woodworking and other types of kind of hard wood cutting. But here when they get them, they become really ritual items that they use for ritual or they use as burial goods. We have 2 spatulate celts. These are unusual shapes. In the interior Southeast, these are basically batons or maces that are held by chiefs and other high-level elites. So again, we have a bunch of fisher hunter-gatherers in Jacksonville, Florida that have these high-profile, very rare artifacts that are coming out of this mountain. We're getting quartz crystals. These are plummets. We're not sure exactly what these plummets are used for, but they're basically would have been probably tied off, maybe for divining or something like that. But that's made out of greenstone. This is a small sample of what he found in these mountains, which was truly remarkable. So what we've done at University of North Florida is we want to know, okay, what's going on in the village where they're living? We don't want to excavate the mounds and find burials or anything like that. So here's where the mound is today. There's houses around it. And so these blue areas represent where we've done larger excavation units, really, since 1999. So we've done 50 1x2 meter units. We do everything in metric, so that would be roughly, 3 by 6 feet. A lot of those are grouped together to form bigger blocks. One area I'm going to talk about is Kinsey's Knoll. So this is about 50 meters, 50 yards from the Shields Mound, where there would have been hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of burials. This is one of the most spectacular areas that I've excavated in Jacksonville. It's truly remarkable. And we think that this site, this Mill Cove complex, it is the dominant, it is the prime Native American site in Northeast Florida. And I would argue that within the state of Florida, no sites have as much exotic material 1,000 years ago than does the Mill Cove complex, Grand and Shields, and another site called Mount Royal, which is near Lake George. So this is this one area called Kinsey's Knoll. It's in somebody's yard that has citrus trees growing on it. We've been excavating it there, and you can see students here working. You can see students down in this pit. That's solid shell. So we're looking at close to 3 feet of solid shell. But what's in that shell is all this garbage that doesn't appear to be everyday garbage. Some of it does, but some of it's pretty spectacular stuff. So what we think this area is, we think this is an area of ceremonial feasting. We think this is an area where they're preparing the bodies to go into the mound. This is an area where they're doing ritual craft production. So we think that this is something completely different than everyday garbage. What we're finding here differs than what we're finding elsewhere in the site or elsewhere anywhere in Jacksonville. It really sets this area or context the site apart from everything. Again, you can see all the piles and piles of shell that are coming out of here. It is incredible. So students are screening, we're pulling things out. The amount of animal bone is truly staggering. We have a couple of huge pits. This huge pit, I think they're processing bodies in here. When Clarence P. Moore dug the mounds, one thing he says about it is that a lot of the burials are not in anatomical order. So what it is, they appear to be storing bodies somewhere, and then maybe during certain occasions, clearing out all the stored bodies and burying them together. We think that they're processing those bodies here, because we're also starting to get little bones that you get lost in doing something like that. Fingers and toes and stuff like that. We're also getting out of here great pottery. And in the core top part of it, what's unique about the pottery, it looks like it's pristine. Looks like it was never used. Looks like they may have made it for these ceremonies and then broke them. And that's it. As we move out to the edges, we see more abrasion and stuff. We get really unusual types that are harder to make, that take longer to make. We call them fine wares. So we have a higher percentage of those within this Kinsey's Knoll compared to other areas of the site. So I think we have multiple lines of evidence that are coming to say that there's something different about here. We're getting pieces of basalt that are broken. You know those celts I talked about? These are broken pieces of them. And when Clarence B. Moore dug that mound, one thing he said, typically when he came to bury, when he came near human remains, he typically knew it because there was red ochre, that they would take iron oxide, which is not local, grind it down, and then probably mix it with white sand and create this either red sand or pink sand, and usually that's laid over burials. What we have is a bunch of this hematite, ochre, in this Kinsey's Knoll, and what you can see in the crooks and crevices here is all that ochre. They're using that to grind it down. So we think they're doing the preparation for mound building here as well. We're getting scraps of copper. Okay, these are nice little thin pieces of copper that they're probably using to wrap around things themselves. We got this great, so many bone pins. Work pieces of bone that are probably hairpins. This one here is actually in size. This is the same thing as the obverse and reverse size, so there's two sides of it. Whether this is true, I don't know, but broadly speaking, the Southeastern Indians have this cosmology belief system in which there are three worlds. This world, the upper world, and the lower world. And sometimes they're represented by an eye motif. And the worlds are held together by four cosmic chords. Could this represent the three worlds? And could these ladders represent the four cosmic chords? Also in a lot of these, we can't see them here, but in those crooks and crevices, with red ochre. So they probably had this ground with red ochre, and it probably really enhanced it and stood out. We have two Cahokia points. There have only been 3 Cahokia points found in the state of Florida. We have 2 of them in this guy's front yard here in Jacksonville. I've had archaeologists from Cahokia who have looked at them. It's Burlington Church. It's not local. These are actually from Cahokia. They are Cahokia points. There's so much great stuff coming out all the time. We're getting lots of these bone pins. We're getting shark's teeth. Some of them are drilled. We're getting this part of quartz crystal. We're getting panther. We're getting bear. We're getting bobcat. We're getting dolphin. We're getting a lot of different types of species. We're getting lots of bird. And bird is probably for the feathers. And then we're also getting more deer than we normally get. So we are getting a faunal assemblage that's different than we normally find in the garbage. And the quantity is really off the roof. So what we're finding out here to do this, all this preserved bone, what's great in these shell middens, what happens is the calcium from the shell leaches out, and basically the bone that's thrown away, the carcasses of fish, the animals, all those things that are thrown away, they absorb that calcium, so they preserve. Also, the calcium helps to neutralize the acidity of the soil with each way organics, so we get great preservation of bone. So probably the thing we know best about them is what they're eating because of these shell middens and the preservation of bone in there. And it's large amounts of fish. Again, we are getting other types of animals, but not nearly the amount of fish that the seafood. This is the last thing to look at. Here's Cahokia. So this dot, these red areas, this represents where those long-nosed god mass and copper have been found. Here we are, way over here. We've also produced Cahokia points. These biconical ear spools. That is what's called a Milco, not Milco, but Milco chert hoe, which is from Cahokia. We got the long-nosed god mass. So here we are, way over here, and all those other areas where you find this stuff is along the Mississippi River and its tributaries. People in the past have said, okay, the reason that it got here is basically this group traded to this group, traded to this group, and so you have these links here that kind of lead to this area. So according to that model, people at the two ends, the place of origin and the place where it's deposited in the ground, never met one another, because there were always intermediaries between that. I don't believe that. I think that people from Cahokia are actually coming here, because we should see a fall-off curve. We should see stuff in between, and we're not. Okay? I think what we see here in Cahokia is stuff from all over the place. I think people from this area are going out to this area. Pocketet, who worked at Cahokia, they basically feel that these are alliance-building items. And so I think there's direct diplomacy going on here. Could people from here going back? Sure. They could be going back there as well. I think this is an incredible feat. and I think people who make this journey probably award themselves great status afterwards. Let me just hit on a couple of other things real quick. That's okay? You okay? Okay. So let's jump ahead now. Again, good stuff is still going on in between. Let's look at contact with Europeans. Okay? So here, 1562. This is the first official, formal kind of contact between Europeans and the groups in this area. This is Jean Ribaud. Jean Ribaud is only in the Jacksonville area probably less than 24 hours. He comes here, he checks things on both sides, he reconnoiters, and he kind of moves on. So he's really not here that long, maybe 2 days. I would say it's less than 24 hours. So he's here short term. He records a lot of things. Then they come back in 1565 to create the Archaeology colony. A couple of big things is we know that they are Timucua is their language. Okay, we can pose that as their name. In reality, Timucua is a language. Timucua seems to be the bastardization of the word Thimagona, which is a native word. Thimagona was actually the name of the chief, probably down here in the Palatka area. Okay, so there was this misunderstanding between the groups as to what it meant. So we basically have used that for them. What we know is Timucua speakers covered a really large area of North Florida and southeastern Georgia, probably 19,000 square miles. And thanks to a priest who was living at San Juan del Puerto, which was a mission in the 1600s on Fort George Island, we know a lot about their grammar and their language. And what we do know is that the dialect of Timucua that was spoken here was Mocama. And Mocama is a local native word, and Mocama means maritime, sea, S-E-A, ocean. So these are the maritime Timucua. So that was the dialect they have. So sometimes you may hear us say the Mocama. It doesn't mean Timucua was wrong. We just kind of use Mocama now for more specificity. That separates them from the Timucua that were visited by Fernando de Soto, or the Quiltano, or the Timucua who were down in St. Augustine, who were the saltwater Timucua, the agua salada, which is definitely not a native word. So there is a difference. There are different dialects spoken between the natives here and the natives in St. Augustine. Both Timucua speakers, one spoke the saltwater dialect, the other spoke the maritime dialect. Just a real quick thing here. When we look at French accounts, we look at some of the early Spanish accounts from the missions in 1602, we get this listing here of native communities that are probably in the mouth of the St. John's area, maybe onto the Barrier Islands. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them in this French documents. There may be more, but these are the most reoccurring ones. And then we have a series of mission ones. What happens is the priest who's at San Juan del Puerto has 9 communities that he proselytizes, evangelizes with. And so basically he records them in their general location. And these are archaeological sites. And we think that we now have at least 5 or 6 of them that we feel really confident that they match to these names. There are other ones that we have that might match to others, or match to ones that were never mentioned in the documents. But we have some that are here. So a couple things we've learned based on our testing of these sites here and other ones that date to the contact period. We can say, I think, a couple of things here. This is remember I showed you this? This is where the oxide, the little shell ring in the marsh was right over here. So this is the mainland part of the south end of Black Camp Island. Can you make out little yellow dots? Do they show up? Okay, those represent shovel tests. This is where not really we, my students, they go out there and they dig these shovel tests. And we're out there digging every 25 meters. We create this grid across there. We have a little gap here and another area here. We think in this area here, we have the orange pottery that dates to 2500 BC. We have plantation era materials. But the biggest thing we have here, spread over a large area, is the pottery that they're making when Europeans arrive. We also have this bell right here. This is a falconry bell that Europeans brought over, and the natives loved it, not because they were into falconry, but because they loved the little tinkling sound that was in there. This dates to about 1600. So we feel strongly that this area is Veracruz. We think this is a later mission that moves into the area called Santa Cruz. All right? So based on the work that we've done over broad areas and work that we've done on Big Talbot Island and Greenfield Peninsula, other areas where we've done shovel tests over a broad area, we've got great information on distributions. I think we can say some things about the Mocama that may differ from what you heard. The first thing that's important to us is pottery. Archaeologists we're obsessed with pottery. Not because pots are people, but one thing about the pottery that's great for us, once we can date it, it becomes a kind of a temporal marker for a time period or for a people. So we now know very confidently what pottery that they're making at European contact, the Mokama here. And what it is, we call it San Pedro, it's real distinct. So now when we find San Pedro pottery, we know we have a context that dates to just before contact up until the early mission period. Okay? And the pottery that they're making here is the same pottery that they're making in Nassau County and actually in parts of Camden County. So the two major Temuco have been Satariba and Tecatocaru. We know that they transform into this mission period pottery. So after about 1600, this is what they make. So we've been able to find these, and we can start saying, okay, we have a mission site, which is a little bit later than the site here that would be a contact site. Okay, so this is going to be late 1500s into the early 1600s, and this is the early 1600s until they leave the area. Are you guys familiar with the Bray engravings? Everyone refers to as Lemoines. They're not Lemoines. We have no Lemoines. We have nothing to compare these to. But he shows them as being farmers. Okay, this is based on these 1591 to the 26 years after contact. But this look at the Temuco here. They have denuded every tree in Duval County. They are planting the bed and furrowing. That's a European way of planting. Okay, so I think that this is going to be an exaggeration, but we have found corn, and we are dating corn, and also that San Pedro pottery. They will start to decorate it with dekerneled cobs, pressing it in, and we can take soot off that and date that. And we're dating a lot of it. And what we're finding out is they're not growing corn here until 1450 at the earliest. You do radiocarbon dating, it doesn't give you a specific date, it gives you a range, but you can use those ranges with a certain amount of probability. So when we do it, we'll call it 2 sigma, which is 97% probability. It can't be earlier than 1450. So they're starting to grow corn really, really late. It's a lot later than people think. In the interior southeast, they're doing it at 900 AD. So everyone thought since they're doing it at 900 AD, the French report them farming in 1565, well then they must have been farming at 900, and they're not. Okay? And I think that's one of the big things we've kind of shown. This is the other thing. This is the depiction of Temucan villages. Okay? Again, based on the Bryant engravings. There is not one mention in any Spanish, French document that states that there was a wall or a palisade around Temuco villages, anywhere in the Temucan area. The only one is under this Bryant engraving that says fortified Temucan settlement. I think this is based on other areas, and they're just assigning that. And so I think we need to start saying kind of no to these engravings. Okay, so there it is. Oops. It's a little sticky. And I think it's more like this. I think based on all those distributions that we're doing, that their villages are more linear and they're along the marsh areas. Okay? And so I think this is one that the National Park Service has. I kind of like it. Okay? So just if you ever see the debris of Lemoines, just be cautious of them because there is really a story behind them. We know that the French are here. They established the Loch Carolyn colony. Loch Carolyn colony, Fort Caroline, lasts 15 months. What a lot of people don't realize is that when the Spanish come and evict them in 1565, the Spanish take over the fort for 4 years. So it exists for 4 more years as San Mateo, Fort San Mateo. And there is no doubt about it that Fort San Mateo is on the St. Johns River. We have lots of good documentation for that. But beginning in 1587, we see that they're going to try to missionize the natives of the Southeast. A lot of times people don't realize that. They think of missions, they think of California, they think of the Alabama, Texas, maybe the Southwest. That mission system is later, so it's earlier here, it's even larger here. I think the reason people don't know about it is we don't have any standing ruins. We don't have the masonry because their churches, their conventos, their communities were all made out of perishable thatched houses. The other thing is, when you hear the word mission, okay, it is essentially a Native American community. The way that they're doing this, they are not building a mission and say, come to us. They basically look at the settlement structure that's existing among the Native Americans, and usually there's one kind of capital settlement, and then a few outlyings around it. They basically build the mission, which is simply a church and a convento for the priests within that Native American community. So when you see these missions we talk about in the Jacksonville area or in the Timucuan area, there's probably one Spaniard in there, a priest, and the rest are Native Americans. Now to the north, on St. Catherine's Island, there'll be a fourth there because that's the northernmost, and then to the far west in Tallahassee, because that's on the periphery, they're protected, and these other frontier ones, these are essentially Native American communities that are a little different. But just to let you know, in this area, it's volume, the oldest and longest lasting mission in the Spanish mission system of La Florida, outside of St. Augustine, is San Juan del Puerto, right here in Fort George Island. Okay? So when they first start building two of their earliest missions are going to be in the Mocama area. At San Juan del Puerto, which is Fort George Island, and San Pedro de Mocama, which is the south end of Cumberland Island, Dungeness Wharf area. Okay? So what you have this time is we have two missions at these two large settlements, and then scores of other Native American communities that are called visitas because the priests here are going out to visiting them. Okay? What we'll see here, by 1610, they add two more Mocama missions. So now there are 4 Mocama missions. Okay? But now we have Santa Maria de Sena, which is on Amelia Island, and San Buenaventura de Guadalquivir, which is on St. Simon's Island. This one's going to become really important for us. So what happens, though, through time, they start contracting down. So by 1655, the people at San Pedro de Mocama on Cumberland Island, they abandoned it and moved to Santa Maria on Amelia Island. So now we're down to 3. Within 10 years, all those that are at Santa Maria move down to San Juan, and then San Buenaventura moves down to Black Hammock Island. So in 1684, all those Mocama settlements, those missions and those outlying communities are down now to just 2 settlements. No outlying missions now, or outlying communities, just 2 of them. And one of them's on Fort George Island, which hasn't moved, and this one just moved to this area. We've been working at Guadalquivir. Guadalquivir is great for us because it lasted only 12 years. Well, we'll see by 1696, it moves to San Juan. So now everyone, all Mocama, are at one mission on Fort George Island. Okay? And in 1702, what's going on, why they're moving, is the English have established Charleston, and believe it or not, they are raiding the missions for mission Indians to take back to Charlestown to sell as slaves, that most of them are going to the Caribbean. So not only are they bringing in Africans to the Caribbean as slaves, they're bringing Native Americans to the Southeast, most of them are mission Indians, and bringing them to that area. So they're telling them, the Spanish government says, hey, you want to protect, you got to get closer to St. Augustine. Also hitting them are French corsairs. French pirates are going up and down. They're not looking for slaves. They're looking for raiding the missions to get any booty, out of there that they can. And 1702, this guy named Moore, Colonel Moore, who is backed by Indians, does the slave raids to all the missions, and they abandon them and they move to St. Augustine. So essentially, it's gone. What happens is they come and have one last settlement for about 3 years. And this is a map of it. This is a great map. This is the mouth of the St. Johns River. This says the Isle of Sarabay. We know Sarabay is Big Talbot Island. This is the Isle of Santa Maria. We know that's Amelia Island. This is Fort George Island, the island of San Juan, where the mission was. And then right here is the last Native American settlement in the Jacksonville area. It lasted probably about 1703 to maybe 1705, 1706. It's called Peleariba. You know where that location is? That's Queens Harbor Yacht and Country Club, right there. So that's where they were living. Eventually they abandoned it, and then you see it again. So I think I run out of time. I had some more photographs of the mission, but I don't want to keep you guys too long. So, do you want to go 5 more minutes? Sure. I would not be offended if you want to get up and walk out now. Hey, Doctor! That's my brother. Okay. So, this is the work that we've done at the mission site. We've been working on this site really from 2005 to 7, 9, 11, 13, 2015. So this was the era where we said the earlier Visita was a community, a small community of Veracruz. It is abandoned in the documents in 1630. So there's nobody out here. That mission that's on Fort George, that's on St. Simon's Island, San Buenaventura de Guadalquivir, it moves to right here. And I think when it moves to here, the Spanish refer to this area as Veracruz or Santa Cruz, but it's abandoned now. So this mission that moves here, which is San Buenaventura de Guadalquivir, once it moves here, it becomes Santa Cruz y San Buenaventura de Guadalquivir, and eventually they drop San Buenaventura. So it becomes Santa Cruz, and I think it's because this area was known to the Spanish as Santa or Veracruz. So we've been working on it. These little dots represent shovel tests. Right here, this is the boundary of the core mission area. We think we have a big structure that we uncovered. We think the church is right here. So this is the fish camp that's on National Park Service property. So we've done a lot of work out there. We've got this great structure that we have found out there. And so here we are. We start out with these small 1 by 2 meter units, but we put them together to form these bigger blocks. We do them like this because we want to keep horizontal control over things. So this lets us know, so we keep vertical control as we go down, we keep horizontal control so we can reconstruct what we're doing because we are destroying the site. So we're opening up these kind of big areas. So you see how they're getting bigger, but in reality, that's a unit, that's a unit, that's a unit, that's a unit. And so we're basically keeping all this stuff kind of together. So we're going to open a massive area over about a 4-year period. And this is where we're first starting out. Actually, this area right here, we had already dug back in 2007. We ran out of time, we backfilled it, but we found these kind of great features in there, these stains. There's something going on. And we actually started to find mission period artifacts. We found pig bone. Now, pig was not here. Pigs were brought by the Spanish. A peach pit. Peaches are not indigenous. They were brought by the Spanish. So we thought, hey, we may have the mission here. And then we got this, and this is the corner of the building. I don't know if you can see it, but boom, 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 boom. These are gigantic posts where they're putting, gigantic holes where they're putting posts in. Once they put the post in, they're filling it up with shell midden as kind of something probably to really stabilize the post, and then they're tamping it down. That's probably also helping to deter insects from eating it up. So we excavated these, we ran out of time, so we had to backfill them. So when we backfilled, we came back. And here's, can you see them? Boom, 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 boom. So we got the wall. So what we have is part of the south wall there. This is what we had before that I just showed you. So now we have this wall, we have this wall. Eventually we're going to get the whole thing. Except for this little corner because there's this massive tree in the way. So we get it. And these are the posts. You can see where the post was. Can you clearly see the fill here and then the post right there? If you can't, you can really see it in this one. Actually, you got part of the post preserved. You see the post right here? So this is the post that would have been in this building between 1684 and 1696. So we got 18 of these posts that range in size from 18 to 28 inches, and their depths are 14 to 35 inches. It took me a while. I had to convert all these from centimeters. I don't know about inches to feet anymore.
Are they pine or palm?
Pardon me?
Are they pine or palm?
This is palm. This is cedar. This is cedar, yeah. But what's interesting, most of the other ones, we got little slivers. This is the best one. In fact, this is the thickest shell that we actually got preserved. So unfortunately, we didn't get large parts of them in each one. But almost done here. But see, this is looking down on it. So you're looking down. Each one of these rectangles are 1 by 2 meter units, so you can see it has a number. So we've opened this big area, so you can see clearly the black areas. These are the posts, and this is where we missed that one corner. Okay? So what it is, it appears to be a 2-room structure here. So we would have missed one here, probably another one right in that area here. Can you see how these are colored, kind of a yellow to tan color? What's interesting is that's called daub. Daub is plaster, clay plaster they're using. In these units, we didn't find any. Then all of a sudden we find it all over this area, suggesting that this area here is sealed, that it actually has walls. So this appears to be in more of an open area. Maybe they're cooking and doing other things. This is actually a walled enclosed area. So whether we have a storage area or if someone's living there, we don't know. But there's something going on, which there are 2 rooms. This is just the daub, and the amount of daub in here is incredible. It's just, we have none of here. So when this thing collapsed, it all kind of, the walls collapsed into that area, and the other area is more open. These are just some of the things we found. So we got a lot of pottery. This is Native American. This right here is Spanish olive jar. This is Majolica or Mahalicas, which are basically probably being produced in Mexico City at this time. This is coming from Spain. We're getting glass beads. This one here is faceted. It might be a rosary bead. This is it's made of brass. You can see kind of a heart shape to it and a flame. This is called a flaming heart of Jesus ring. This is a brass cross. It actually says in Latin, original sin. We also have another one that's lead, so we have some religious pieces. We have another kind of ring. So we have a small amount of religious artifacts. We have a small amount of European kind of pottery, and just large amount of native pottery. So I just want to thank everyone who's ever helped us. We have so many people that help us, from our great students to the general public to various kind of organizations that have sponsored various projects. We do have people are still on Facebook. We do have a UNF Archaeology Lab Facebook page, which basically shows a lot of these images and the projects we work on. So if you ever want to see what we're up to or look back over the past, about 6 or 7 field school summers, it's got a lot of our excavation photos. Okay, so I think I've kept you long enough. Sorry if I went over. Anyone has a question, I'll answer, or if you want to come up and ask me.
Do you have 5 minutes? I brought a few things you might want to look at.
Yes, I have 5 minutes. Answer my 5 minutes? I'll ask my wife. Yes. Yes.
My mother found it right here on the beach in Ponte Vedra.
Did she get it
No,
just
she
now?
hasn't.
Around. I haven't shown it to you. I just have it.